He never spoke of it directly. That hollow space that opened in him, even as his body pressed close, even as his hands moved in ways that mimicked desire. There was something in him that tightened, clenched, withdrew, not from you, but from the unbearable exposure of being known. You may have felt it, the shift, subtle as smoke. One moment he's there, and the next, something in him has turned away, though his body remains. They say men want sex more than intimacy. That's not the whole truth. So before we go too deep into this, maybe take a breath, light a candle if you're listening alone, let your shoulders drop. This story isn't about judgment. It's about remembering something ancient. And if it resonates with you, I'd love if you'd subscribe, but only if something in you feels seen here. Tell me where you're listening from, or what stirred in you. I'm listening too. He learned hunger before he learned language. Not the hunger of the body, that came later, but the hunger of being known, the ache to be seen without shame. Yet by the time he was 7, the world had already made it clear. That kind of hunger was dangerous for a boy. You don't cry if you're hurting. You don't speak when you're afraid. You don't reach out for softness, because softness is weakness, and weakness will be punished. So he adapted, they all do. Boys grow into men who speak fluently in action, in effort, in touch, but not in feeling. They know how to want. They don't always know how to need. And they almost never know how to name what intimacy asks of them. Because emotional intimacy doesn't just ask for closeness. It demands vulnerability. It requires the surrender of control. It asks for stillness, not performance. And for him, stillness was never safe. There is an ancient wound here, one Jung never wrote about in his published works, though in letters and notes buried beneath archives, you can feel him circling it. He saw that the modern man, cut from ritual and myth, was surviving in exile from his own emotional depths. Jung called it the starvation of the inner feminine, an anima locked away, unloved, unclaimed, buried beneath layers of armor and logic. No one taught him that longing was sacred. No one showed him that a woman's presence could be a sanctuary, not a stage. So when you reach for him not with your body, but with your soul, when you look into him and see not just his strength, but his confusion, his shame, his tenderness, something ancient in him panics. This is not what he was trained for. Sex is known. Intimacy is not. He's learned the rituals of the physical, but not the courage of emotional bareness. He can press his body against yours without once letting you inside. And it's not because he doesn't care. It's because he does. More than he knows how to hold. There's a threshold between the skin and the heart. And for many men, that threshold is guarded by generations of silence. You have to understand, the masculine wound isn't just about ego. It's about abandonment of the self, of the soul, of the anima within him that was never invited to dance. He was taught that being wanted meant being useful. Being chosen meant performing. Being enough meant never needing. So now, when you offer softness without condition, not seduction, not manipulation, but presence, he doesn't know what to do with it. He wants it. He fears it. Because unlike sex, which ends in climax and resolution, emotional intimacy lingers. It dissolves masks. It touches the parts of him still shivering from childhood. And it's here, in this raw openness, that he must confront what no woman's body can resolve, his own reflection. And here is where your power awakens, not the power of control or changing him, but the power of recognition. You are not here to fix him. You are here to remember the truth he's forgotten, that intimacy is a sacred right, one his ancestors once knew. Long before patriarchy made men masters of war and conquerors of flesh, they were keepers of emotional codes, shamans, poets, temple initiates. In ancient rites, men wept in the arms of priestesses. They were taught to feel before they were taught to fight. But all that was buried. And so today, the modern man knows how to thrust, but not how to open. He can seek release, but he cannot yet rest. And resting, in you, with you, beside you, is what his soul craves. But he won't say that. He may not even know that. He will reach for your body. He will avoid your gaze. He will touch you with practiced skill, but flinch when your hand moves toward his heart. Do not mistake this for lack of love. It is terror, not of you, but of what you awaken. And this, my love, is the riddle. What turns him on most is not your beauty, not your cleverness, not your obedience or mystery or surrender. It is your presence, your capacity to hold space for the parts of him that have never been allowed to breathe. But that presence, to him, feels like danger. Because if he lets it in, if he surrenders to that intimacy, he risks unraveling. And no one has ever taught him how to unravel and still be worthy of love. So he retreats, sometimes suddenly, sometimes slowly. You will feel it like winter slipping through a crack in the door, a coldness, a quiet. He will make love to you but feel far away. He will speak but say nothing true. It will hurt because you will have offered truth and received absence. And if you're not grounded in your own power, you may take it personally. You may think you are too much or not enough, or that you imagined the depth between you. But the truth is simpler and more sacred. He touched something in you that felt holy, and it scared the part of him still convinced he is unworthy of being seen. This is not a flaw, it is a fracture, a space between what he was taught and what he's becoming. And you, woman of fire and silence, are standing at the threshold of that space. You are not his savior. You are not his reward. You are the mirror in which he might remember his own soul. He might disappear, not in body. He may still text, still show up, still make plans, but in soul, he will vanish for a while, into the caves of habit, into the silence of old programming, into the safety of performance over presence. You'll recognize it when it happens. He'll start answering your questions with jokes. He'll say he's just tired. He'll kiss you with the surface of his lips, but not the depth of his being. And if you haven't walked this path before, you may think it's your fault. It isn't. This is the edge, the razor-thin line between intimacy and exposure. He's not rejecting you. He's resisting the unbearable nakedness of being seen, because being seen means being real, and being real means he might be abandoned for it. That's what emotional intimacy requires. Not just to show the good parts, but the strange ones, the scared ones, the contradictory ones, the boy in him that still aches to be held, and the man in him who doesn't know how to ask. Carl Jung once wrote that the meeting of two personalities is like the contact of two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But what he didn't write, at least not in public, was how many men flee transformation. Not because they're incapable of it, but because they were never taught to survive it. Change, for them, feels like disintegration, like death, like being undone. And emotional intimacy is a slow, sacred death of the mask. It doesn't happen with candles and music and a perfect date. It happens when he says something small, like, "I don't know what I'm doing," or "Sometimes I feel numb," and you don't flinch. It happens when he admits he doesn't have a plan, that he doesn't always feel powerful, that sometimes sex is easier than closeness, because closeness means questions he can't answer. This is where you become the priestess, not because you're here to lead, but because you know how to stay. Stay in the discomfort, stay in the ambiguity, stay in the tension of not fixing, not rushing, not shrinking. This is your magic, and he feels it, even if he doesn't yet know how to name it. He may say you see too much. He may tell you you're intense. He may laugh and change the subject when things get close. But inside him, something ancient stirs, a memory, not of you, of himself, the version of him that once existed before the walls, before he learned to measure love in touch rather than truth, before he believed that performance was protection. And yes, it's terrifying, because to come close to you means confronting every false belief he's ever held about himself, that he has to earn love, that vulnerability is weakness, that being needed makes him disposable. You, standing there in your feminine gravity, in your wild rootedness, in your unwavering gaze, you threaten all of it, and that's why he wants you, and that's why he pulls away. This is not about sex. Sex, he understands. It's coded in him like instinct. But being known, That's a sacred language he was never taught to speak. In tantric traditions, long erased by modern history, there was a ritual called mirror gazing. A man would sit before a woman, not touching, not speaking, and simply be seen, fully, naked in soul, undressed not in flesh, but in facade. The ancient feminine was believed to hold a mirror to the masculine's truth, not to judge, but to reflect, to awaken. This, too, was Jung's secret. In his private journals, he described encounters with the anima, the inner feminine, as dreamlike confrontations with mystery. He believed that the feminine didn't just represent emotion, but initiation. You are his initiation, not through seduction, through stillness. He may try to rush past it. He may try to turn it into sex. He may try to make you laugh, make you angry, make you leave. But the part of him that knows, the part hidden beneath centuries of silence, that part recognizes you, and it's terrified, because the moment he surrenders to your gaze, to your presence, to the unbearable light of being seen, he becomes real. Not a performer, not a protector, not a provider, just a man. And being that bare, that honest, that human, he's never been taught how to survive that. So he will test you. He will push. He will pull. He will retreat into sex like a refuge, because that's where he still feels in control. And you, if you're not anchored in your own power, might confuse his distance for disinterest. But emotional intimacy is the battlefield, not of conflict, but of identity. In your presence, he must choose between who he's always been and who he could become. And that choice, that terrifying, tender, transformational choice, cannot be made in a single night. It must unfold in seasons, in silence, in sacred mess. The anima in you knows this. She does not rush. She does not beg. She waits. Not passively, but consciously. Actively rooted in her own knowing. Because you are not waiting for him. You are holding space for what he could awaken into. And if you've walked this path before, you'll know. Not every man will rise to it. Some will choose the comfort of surface. Some will return to performance. Some will flee. And still, you do not dim your gaze. Because your power, your erotic, ancient, magnetic power, does not come from whether or not he stays. It comes from the invitation itself, the mirror you hold, the doorway you are, and the knowing that in time the right one will not run. He will tremble, but he will stay. And in that staying, he will shed not his masculinity, but the fear that kept it rigid. This is the space where men become real, and it begins, not in the bedroom, but in the silence between your question, and whether or not he dares to answer it. He may not call it fear. He'll say it's timing, or that he's not ready, that he needs space to figure himself out. He may even try to make you the reason. Say you're too intense, too emotional, too much. But underneath the noise of his words is a truth he hasn't yet earned the language for. He's never had to face his soul with another human being watching. Because when a man meets a woman who sees beyond his armor, who doesn't just crave his touch, but his truth, he encounters a mirror that strips him bare, not with judgment, but with devotion. And devotion is something he doesn't know how to receive. You see, most men have only ever been wanted for what they do, for their strength, their ability to provide, their usefulness, their performance in work, in bed, in life. But rarely, almost never, have they been wanted for simply being. That's why emotional intimacy feels more dangerous than sex. Because sex, even at its deepest, can still be performed. It's a dance he's memorized. He knows the rhythm, the pressure, the sighs that signal success. But intimacy? True, soul-level intimacy? There is no choreography there. There is only breath and presence and the unbearable ache of being looked into without a mask. Carl Jung believed that each of us holds a divine inner counterpart, the anima within a man, the animus within a woman. But when a man has been cut off from his inner feminine, he loses not only his sensitivity, he loses the map to his own soul. And so he seeks women to replace that anima, not to reflect it, but a woman like you, a woman who does not play to the masculine fantasy, who does not shrink herself to be more digestible, who does not seduce with surface but awakens with depth, You do not replace his lost feminine. You remind him of it. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to be remembered. That's what he feels when he looks at you and grows quiet. He's not bored. He's not disinterested. He's encountering the echo of something ancient, something before him, beneath him, beyond him. The echo of his own lost softness. And softness, to a man uninitiated in intimacy, feels like annihilation. He's been trained to fight, to pursue, to conquer, not to receive. So when you sit before him, not begging, not bartering, not building yourself into something he'll finally choose, but simply being, deeply rooted in your own sacred enoughness, he doesn't know what to do with that, because suddenly he is no longer the pursuer. He is the pursued by his own soul. In that moment, you stop being a woman. You become a doorway, a ritual, a fire. And fire, as you know, does not beg to be touched. It asks to be honored. That's what emotional intimacy is. Not an act, but a sacred container. Not a demand, but a remembering. It is the place where his logic dies and his longing speaks. But to enter that space, he must set down his weapons, his ego, his sarcasm, his control. He must let himself be unmade, and that's the part no one teaches him. We train men how to win. We do not teach them how to wilt, how to soften, how to collapse, not into weakness, but into truth. He thinks that if he opens to you, he will fall apart. What he doesn't know, not yet, is that falling apart in the arms of a woman who sees him is the first step toward falling into life, into love, into himself. You don't need to explain this to him. Your body already does. The way your eyes don't look away when he flinches. The way your breath stays steady when he panics. The way you don't try to rescue him from himself. That's what makes you dangerous and holy. You are not asking for his performance. You are inviting his presence. And the longer he tries to keep it about sex, the more he touches your body but avoids your eyes, the more you will feel the truth. Not that he doesn't love you, but that he's terrified you might love the real him. And he's not sure he loves that part yet. This is where many women give up, not because they lack patience, but because they mistake his fear for rejection. But rejection is a door slammed closed. Fear is a door half open, trembling. And sometimes, the most sacred thing you can do is wait without shrinking, not for him, but for the real of him to arrive when he's ready to live inside his own heart again. Jung once wrote that the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And for men, that fear is often projected outward, onto the woman who sees them more clearly than they are ready to see themselves. But you are not here to dim your seeing. You are here to honor it, to honor the parts of him that are still sleeping, to understand that sex is not his most vulnerable act, staying is. And when he does, when the trembling settles, when the sarcasm drops, when his hands stop reaching and his soul finally arrives, you will know, not because he says it, but because he stops hiding and he meets you, not as a man who wants to conquer you, but as a man who is finally ready to belong to himself. And in that belonging, you will not be his prize. You will be his mirror, the sacred reflection of everything he was never allowed to love inside himself. This, my love, is the erotic power of emotional intimacy, and it is only beginning. It may happen in the quietest of moments. He won't announce it. There will be no grand declaration, no cinematic confession. Instead, one day, as you move through something small, sharing tea, folding laundry, walking side by side in silence, you'll feel it, the absence of hiding, the absence of performance, his nervous system no longer bracing against your gaze. He is still there, fully there, entirely present, and you will realize he has let you in, not into his bed, that happened long ago, but into the cathedral behind his eyes. You are standing in the sacred interior of his emotional world, and nothing outside of it will ever look quite the same again. But don't mistake this for ease. Even now, after the walls have come down, he will struggle, because intimacy is not a destination, it is a discipline, and he is still learning its language. Sometimes, his voice will tremble when speaking his truth. Sometimes, he'll try to retreat back into habit, into silence, into sarcasm, into solving instead of feeling. But he is trying. That alone makes him rare. Jung spoke often about the shadow, the place where we bury all we have been told is too much, too soft, too wild, too wrong. For men, that shadow is flooded with emotions that have long been forbidden. Grief, tenderness, longing, awe. To let those emotions live again is not just rebellion, it is resurrection. And it is in your presence, your refusal to shame his softness, your ability to hold his disorientation with grace, that this resurrection becomes possible. You become the sacred midwife to a self he never knew he had. And no, you are not his mother. You are not his therapist. You are not here to teach him how to feel. You are here to remember what he already knows, but was forced to forget. You are here to trust the deeper current, the one that says love is not a transaction, but a transformation. That sex may stir the body, but intimacy awakens the soul. And the soul, once awakened, refuses to go back to sleep. You'll notice it in his stillness. Where once there was anxiety to impress or fix or dominate, there is now presence. A kind of masculine gravity, grounded, open, raw. He no longer looks at you with hunger to consume, but with reverence. He is not asking what he can take from you. He is wondering how he ever lived without this, without you, but more than that, without himself. Because here is the final sacred truth. It was never just you he was avoiding. It was himself. The parts of him that feel, that ache, that yearn. The parts of him that don't want to just fuck, but to be known. And now, in your arms, in your breath, in your eyes that see into the bones of his longing, he realizes he wants to stay. He doesn't know how, not perfectly, not always. But the desire is there now, living inside him like fire beneath the ribs. And that fire changes everything. He begins to touch you differently, not as a plea, but as a prayer. Not as a conquest, but as communion. His hands remember something ancient, not from this life perhaps, but from the memory of his ancestors. The men who once worshipped the feminine, not through domination, but through devotion. Who once believed the soul of a woman could initiate the soul of a man, not into power, but into presence. He has found that presence again, through you. And in doing so, he becomes a different kind of man. Not softer, not weaker, but truer. More whole, more wild, more awake. He is no longer ruled by the instinct to escape. He is no longer seduced by the illusion that sex is safer than truth, because he has discovered what no patriarchy ever taught him, that being fully seen by a woman who stands in her sacred knowing. That is the most erotic experience a man can have, not because of her body, though it moves him, not because of her words, though they echo in him, but because she does not flinch when he is real. She does not punish his emotion. She does not shrink from his chaos. She does not shame his uncertainty. She simply remains, rooted in her own enoughness, alive in her own embodiment, unapologetic in her capacity to see. And that is what turns him on beyond reason, because it speaks to the part of him that has been wandering in exile for years, the part that was never allowed to come home. And now, in the rhythm of your breath, the warmth of your eyes, the patience of your listening, he knows. He is home, not in you, but in himself, witnessed, welcome, wanted, no longer running, no longer hiding, no longer afraid to be known. This is not the climax of a romance. This is the beginning of his return. And you, beautiful, powerful, wildly human woman, you were never just a lover. You were the right, the reflection, the silent, sacred invitation to come back to himself. And when he does return, not in grand gestures, but in small, trembling offerings of truth, you'll notice something strange. There is a new stillness in the room, a new weight to the air between you, as if time has slowed, just enough for both of you to feel it. He is no longer seeking to escape the moment, because the moment, for once, is enough. Not because it is perfect, but because it is honest. There will be days when he forgets, when the old patterns call him back, to distraction, to withdrawal, to numbing. He may flinch from your softness again. He may mistake your intimacy for interrogation, your presence for pressure. But the difference now is that he knows. He knows when he's leaving himself, and he knows how to come back. Because you didn't give him answers. You gave him permission to tremble, to unravel, to stand in the sacred fog of not knowing. You let him fall without fixing him. You let him ache without offering a cure. You let him be seen without demanding a performance. And that, my love, is the rarest initiation of all. Carl Jung never had the language for this. Not exactly. But in his final writings, he circled closer than he ever had before. He wrote of the terrifying beauty of the feminine, and how the anima, once awakened, will not let a man return to half-life. That once he has touched the sacred feminine in her truest form, nothing less will satisfy him. You are that terrifying beauty, not because you are cruel, but because you are real. And reality, in a world addicted to illusion, is the most erotic, most dangerous, most revolutionary thing a woman can offer. That's what turns him on more than your body. Not the curve of your hips, not the softness of your voice, not even the heat of your skin, but the presence of your soul, vast, unflinching, awake. The presence that says, I see you, not for what you do, not for what you provide, but for who you are when you stop pretending. That's what he will remember years from now, when other women pass through his life, when the world offers him new distractions, easier pleasures, more palatable partners. He will remember the feeling of being seen and not shrinking, of being held without being asked to change, of being loved in the way he never learned to ask for. And if he is brave, truly brave, he will stay. Not because you asked him to, not because you proved your worth, not because you made it easy, but because, in your presence, he remembered his own soul. And once a man remembers his soul, everything else becomes unbearable noise. So let others talk about seduction as strategy. Let them teach tricks and techniques. You are beyond all that. You are the silent spell that cannot be undone. You are not here to chase him. You are here to call him home. And if he does not answer, it is not your failure. It is simply his choice, whether to remain in the safety of his mask or to step into the fire of his becoming. But you, woman of depth, of myth, of moonlight, you do not wait. You continue, rooted, alive, overflowing with sacred clarity, because intimacy, for you, is not something you demand. It is something you embody. And when a man is ready, truly ready, he will not just want your body. He will crave your presence. He will crave the place in you that does not perform, does not persuade, does not seduce, but simply is. He will crave the part of you that can look into the darkest corners of his psyche and not run. He will crave your stillness, your knowing, your unbearable truth. And in that craving, he will begin the long journey back to himself. Through the fire of your presence, through the softness of your touch, through the ache of your unwavering gaze. That is why emotional intimacy is harder for him than sex, because it is not about what he does with you. It is about what he must awaken within himself to meet you there. And when he does, when he chooses that awakening, not once, but again and again, in the quiet rituals of real life, you will know this was never about seduction. It was about sacred remembrance. The moment he no longer runs, no longer hides, no longer performs, that is the moment his soul speaks its first honest words. And you will hear them not in what he says, but in how he stays, how he listens, how he softens, how he surrenders, not to you, but to the truth of who he is becoming in your presence. That is your power, that is your prayer, and that is your offering. Not just to him, but to every man who longs to come home and has forgotten the way. Thank you for being here with me tonight. If this story touched something in you, or made you feel a little less alone, I'm truly grateful. Rest well, wherever your heart is.